At the beginning of your career, there are a lot of choices to make. What languages are you going to learn? What frameworks to adopt? Which YouTube host has the best t-shirts? And so on. But to be honest, this stuff matters less than what kind of software you create and what kind of problems it solves, and what the people that you work with and the companies that you work for are like. So how do you find the best places to work for you? And what makes the difference between a great place to work and a bad one? Hi, I'm Dave Farley of Continuous Delivery. Welcome to my channel, and if you haven't been here before, please do hit subscribe, and if you enjoy the content today, hit like as well. I'd like to say thank you to our sponsors, Harness, Equal Experts, Octopus and SpecFlow, who are supporting the channel, so please do check their links in the description below. My training courses offer another route to learning. If you're interested in improving your skills as a developer, take a look at my training course, Better Software Faster, which describes the most effective approach to software development that we've found so far. There is no single answer to the question, where should I begin? It obviously depends on what your goals are. If your aim is to make your fortune, that may be one set of choices. If you hope to make a difference in the world, then that's probably another. If your goal is to learn, to hone your craft, then that's yet another. So this video is not going to end up with a single answer. My goal is rather to explore some of these different directions and also to take a look at what the data says along the way. My starting position is that ours is a discipline focused primarily on learning. Whatever the systems that we build, whatever the industry sector that we inhabit, I think that's true. I don't mean this in some kind of trite generalistic way. I don't mean we're all learning and growing all of the time. I mean something much more specific than that. Software developers build systems to solve problems for people. It is nearly always true that when you start out on some new software, you don't know what it is that it needs to do. You have to learn that as you go. And you don't know how best to design it or to develop it. Even if you do have some guesses about these things, you don't really know where to start. If you do know these things, then you're working on something extremely simple and something extremely unusual. I once wrote something called a virtual device driver for an early version of Windows. The inputs were a defined protocol through a defined interface. The outputs were the same. But I still had to learn all sorts of things to make it work and solve problems that I hadn't thought of when I began. This matters for several reasons. It means that over the course of our careers, the real skills that matter, the transferable skills that we will take with us between the teams and the companies that we work for, are the skills that allow us to learn new things. Much more so than the skills of language, frameworks or tools. So one dimension in choosing where is best to work is to ask where is going to teach us new things and so help us to grow as developers. What new things you want to learn is of course down to you. New technology, sure, but different kinds of problems, different ways of working, and maybe most important of all, different people that you think that you can learn from. Sure, the industry in which you work is going to make a difference. The nature of the problems that you will solve will vary, but I think that the people that you work with and how they approach their work matters more. I'm not going to spend an awful lot more time on this aspect, but do look it up. Read the State of DevOps report. Read the Accelerate book. This stuff matters because the biggest predictors of success for a team is the degree to which the people feel safe to express their ideas and contribute. This is the main predictor of high scores in job satisfaction, reduction in burnout and lots of other positive indicators that add up to the fact that these are the places where people prefer to work. Next, let's think about the kinds of problem that we may like to work on. It's extremely nice to work on things that you care about. If you have a passion for gaming, then writing games may be for you. If you are fascinated by science, then working on scientific instruments may be the answer. All of those things might be great. I've been fortunate to have had a fairly diverse career. I've worked on a wide variety of different problems, some on topics that I loved, some not. I got interested in computers and software very early on. I started writing games because that was what I knew about computers at the time, and then in the early part of my career I worked for computer companies on tools, operating systems and device drivers. Starting off in a problem area you know can help to get you started on your road to learning. But it can also be limiting, unless that is what you really want to do. One of the biggest lessons that I learned was that for me, the problem domain is not the primary draw. Sure, if I can find work on a topic that I love, that's great. But actually, I've found a lot of pleasure and fulfilling, challenging work, even on problems that I personally find rather dull. I've built order management systems and point of sale systems, accountancy systems and monitoring tools. None of these are particularly interesting topics to me, but I had a great time doing it and I learned a huge amount. I'll pick games as the clearest example that I can think of this kind of thinking. Most people's early experience of computers is probably with playing games of some form. So we're all exposed to these absorbing, interesting types of software. So it's pretty natural to like the idea of working in the games industry. Writing games is appealing. It sounds like a creative, technically challenging job, and it certainly can be, but not always. It certainly used to be the case that game development was pretty leading edge stuff. One of the things that I used to like about writing games in the early days was that there were no constraints. Genuine innovation at the technical level as well as at the level of gameplay was the name of the game, really. I think this is probably less true now than it used to be. The growth of big game platforms like Unity and Unreal Engine mean that the technical aspects have become a bit more commoditized. This isn't a bad thing, but it places a limit, at least in the technical direction, on creativity. The other aspect of the games industry is really down to market forces, because a significant fraction of new developers like the idea of writing games. The competition for jobs in this industry is very high. As a result, salaries are lower, conditions are often worse unless you're extremely lucky. Data from the games industry says that 64% of game creators have been in the industry for less than 10 years. So people don't tend to stay in that industry for a very long time. 24% of game creators have worked for between 3 and 5 different employees in the past 5 years. So people are moving around looking for good places to work. 53% report that crunch, that is working for more than 60 hours a week under times of stress, is expected of them on a regular basis. Game companies are not very diverse. Most game developers are young white dudes. But then again, demographically, most developers in general are young white dudes too. It's a problem for all of us, not just game firms. Of course, not all gaming companies are the same. But that is really my point. The people, how they work together, is really the important thing, more so than the industry. The other appealing sector for new developers are often the big famous software companies. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, Netflix, Apple, and so on. There are lots of misconceptions about working for top tech companies. Most of them do tend to pay quite well, and they consciously aim to be very selective in recruitment. You generally need to be good to work for these firms. You don't need to be a genius, but you do need to be good. But what do firms like these look for? Here's a quote from an answer on Quora about working for the tech giants from somebody who does. Don't confuse smart with knowledgeable. What companies look for, especially in entry-level and less experienced hires, is not knowing a bunch of stuff, but being able to learn new stuff. If you're smart, it means that you're going to learn more, not less. One of the pleasures of software development is creating things that people find useful or fun. Seeing people use software that you created is a very nice feeling. I was part of a team who built a point of sale system for one of the UK's biggest retailers a few years ago. I still get a small thrill of pleasure when I see it in use when I visit one of their stores. Working for the big tech companies gives you this. It means that you may get to work on something that millions or even billions of people may use, but it doesn't guarantee it. The economics of working for organisations like these usually works opposite to the game companies, because these firms are actively selecting what they see as the best in the market of developers, and because they make lots of money, they tend to pay quite well compared to other employers. Also, because software development is their business, they tend to be more innovative in approach. For example, my earlier quotes about high-performing teams being characterised by how much they trust each other is based on research carried out internally at Google. Another sector that generally pays quite well is the finance industry. Again, this is a business that makes a lot of money and so often pays quite well. I'm going to talk about finance here, and there are some specifics to that industry, but really this stuff is pretty general for the kinds of organisations that see their business as being elsewhere, but rely heavily on computing. They often see software as a service to the business rather than the business itself. Jobs in finance are often a bit more stable than other industries, certainly more so than the games industry. Finance as an industry was an early adopter of computerisation for fairly obvious reasons. Theirs is really an information-only business. After all, money these days is just bits in a computer, but except for some of the more enlightened organisations, they don't always recognise that. This has pros and cons. On the plus side, finance institutions value software development because it's so central to what they do. But they have tended to throw money at the problem over many years, which has resulted in teams being far too big, far too bureaucratic, and often far too slow moving as a result. I once worked on a project for a bank. This was in the fairly early days of continuous delivery. We were rescuing a failing software project. We created automated acceptance tests, automated the deployment of the system, built a simple but effective deployment pipeline, and when it came time to release, we ran into the institutional nature of the bank. We were asked to write a document, a deployment script outlining the manual steps necessary to configure the system and release it into production. We said, no need, we've automated the deployment, just run this script and it will configure everything. They said, we have a project for automating deployment. It will be done in 3 years' time, so you can't use your automated deployment script before then. Not all finance organisations are like this. Some are fast-moving and innovative, but yet again, you need to look at the team you'll be joining and how they work. If you are serious about growing your experience and learning to learn faster and better, then consultancy can be a good route. As ever, there are trade-offs and things to look out for. Working for a software consultancy has the significant advantage that you get to see a more diverse range of things. Different technologies, different teams, different approaches to development, different problem domains. This is a good way to grow your experience quickly if you're open to the lessons. It comes at the cost of you missing the experience often of living with the problems that you cause. Software development is not just about writing code and moving on. If you do that, you miss the implications of your screw-ups. And if we're focusing on learning, then we learn the most from our screw-ups. Dealing with your first outage in production changes how you think about stuff like logging. Coming back to code that you wrote a year ago changes how you think about design and the importance of managing the complexity in our systems. To grow as a software developer, you need to see these things happen. And the danger in consultancy is that often you don't. That can lead you to overestimating how good your solutions really were. The last category that I will call out are startups. The nice thing about startups is that you often feel a much greater sense of ownership and responsibility for your work. As ever, it depends hugely on the people involved. I enjoy working in startups. They can be great opportunities to make a difference. By their nature, you're usually beginning with a blank sheet, so you can start from scratch and avoid the mistakes of the past. The risk, of course, is that you'll make your own new mistakes. And to a greater degree than in other work environments, the success or failure is more clearly down to you. This can either be liberating or extremely stressful, depending on you and the circumstances. The downsides for startups is that they are risky. No one knows if the venture will be a commercial success or not. This is a business experiment, and failure is always an option. So there's no job security here, and despite everybody's dreams, most startups fail. The data is pretty depressing. The data says that 90% of startups fail. The other tricky problem with startups is often that they are small. So you'll probably have a closer relationship with the people that you work with. This is a good and bad thing. Some of my best friends are my friends because we worked together in startups. But if you don't get on with someone, or the culture of a place where you work is problematic, that might be a bigger deal in a small organisation than in a big one, because there's no place to withdraw or to hide. Naturally, this list isn't exhaustive. It's based on my career and my experience. I've largely looped through all of these different types of organisations during the course of my career, working in technical companies where software was the core product, for startups trying something new, for businesses that use software as a means to some other end, and in consultancies, which gave me a broader, more analytical view of software development. I found that after working in one of these sectors for a few years, I tended to miss something from the others. I don't think that there is a right answer. There are certainly some personal wrong answers. There are some kinds of companies that I wouldn't work for ethical reasons, for example. There are others that I didn't work for more practical reasons. I lived in places that didn't give me access to some kinds of work. For me, money was never my primary motivation. Don't get me wrong. I want to be paid. I'm a professional software developer and I like to be paid, and paid well, for my work. But that has never been why I chose a particular job or employer. I've come to learn that what I like personally is difficult problems. I find it most exciting, most rewarding when I get to work on problems that I don't know how to solve the problem yet. I don't claim that this is a better or worse motivation than any other, but it has been mine, and it drove my choices through a significant part of my career. This might be a good place to start for you. Be honest with yourself about why you want a job in software, and that may help you to find the right one. I hope that you found some of this interesting. I hope that it may help you to think about what might be your ideal workplace. Let me know in the comments below. I've been lucky enough to have worked in teams where I was actively looking forward to returning to work after a holiday. I think that's a pretty good test. Thank you for watching.